on this land and are committed to moving forward in the spirit of reconciliation. The agenda was distributed as any discussion or comments on the agenda? Seeing none, motion to approve. Presentation from Deputy Allen, Inspector.
Morning. Thank you, Chair. With us today, pardon me? Oh, wait.
Thank you. Is there any conflicts of interest? So I didn't ask the members of the board with respect to the agenda. And seeing none, there is in our agenda are the minutes from our November 2021 open board meeting. Motion to approve those. Questions, discussion, comments? Looking over there as well.
No, I don't.
All those in favor? That's approved. Now, sorry for that, Deputy Allen.
Thanks, Chair. I just want to acknowledge we have Nicole Lees in the room. She's the manager of our Records Information Management Services. She'll be the brains behind the PowerPoint. Many thanks to her and her team and Victoria as well for the preparation of the PowerPoint that used to pass on this information. This will be the Q3 statistical analysis presentation as it relates to information that is garnered from CAD and our UCR, our Uniform Crime Reporting data. Please note that the data we're presenting today is current as of November 3rd, 2021. The systems used to track the information are live and therefore subject to experience fluctuations of increase or decrease in values past the specified date. Data is also subject to a couple of influencers, and it's important to note that some of the data can be influenced by proactive enforcement-driven initiatives that may or may not have contributed to a sudden rise or fall of the statistical findings, depending on when the initiatives have taken place. And further, a reactive or complaint-driven perspective, the public volume of complaints due to events experienced and or expressed within the community, nationally or globally, contribute to the rise and fall of statistics. It's also important to remember that this data is not an absolute true reflection of what is happening within our community. The UCR survey collects information only on crimes that come to the attention of police. UCR data, therefore, does not contain account of all the crimes happening within our community. Some crimes are never detected, and of those that are, some are not brought to the attention of the police. It's important also to note that the UCR data that I spoke about reports crimes that have been substantiated by police. Really simplifying this, when the information comes in, it isn't always as we recorded at the end. Someone may report, I've been robbed, when in fact, it's just been a theft. And the investigation will reveal that, and our personnel in RIMS will notify that appropriately and report that to Stats Canada. The following slide, or the current slide, shows the data overview and what we'll be looking at today. Calls for service, occurrence and violations, our provincial offense notices for the quarter, any notable events, crimes against persons, property crime, drug offenses, criminal traffic violations, other criminal code violations, and some miscellaneous slide. We will look at calls for service next. Thank you. Calls for service are CAD generated. These are not affected by the UCR coding that I spoke about earlier. We'll note that the trending average for calls for service, the 5-year average is 52,022. So currently we're at 55,842. We're trending upwards and we'll continue to monitor this. 2020, you'll see our stats were a little bit low and we really looked at COVID to explain that. It's important to note as well, on the next slide. When we speak to occurrences and violations, Calls for service are one way to capture police activity. They involve a call from a complainant. Occurrences are captured in niche for all police activity, not just from the community. Occurrences can also be from self-reports online, as well as police-generated occurrences. So therefore, occurrences are a culmination of CAD calls, cop logic, self-reporting, and police-generated occurrences. Violations is a term that we take through the UCR coding again, and it's a contravention of federal or provincial statutes and are what StatsCan uses for uniform crime reporting, or the UCR as I refer to it. One call or occurrence may involve several violations, arrests, or charges. You'll see the slide here, in the slide, you'll see our calls for services and our occurrences, although very similar. When you break them down on the right side of the slide, the violations, charges, and arrests don't automatically refer to the other. Our provincial offense notices, or PONs as we like to call them, we're down to 2302 in this quarter, and it's a decrease overall quarter to quarter, but it is significant to notice that there's been an increase over past years. The 5-year average is 7,719, and we are currently at 9,399 for Q1 through 3. Some of the things that may have affected the last quarter's PON stats include the summer months of Marine Patrol holidays training, and we had some significant investigations that draw our resources from the road into administrative duties. That said, the traffic unit did attend over 128 targeted locations in the last quarter to proactively target prohibited drivers, continuous complaints, high-risk intersections, and school zones. Notable events in the last quarter speak to Project Erase. This is a project that stands for Eliminate Racing Activity on Streets Everywhere, and it's a joint initiative with Barrie Police, York Police, and the OPP. I want to show a couple of stats in here. Locally, we did lay 13 charges as it relates to the no muffler or modified muffler charges. Overall, we laid 63 provincial offenses, 2 criminal codes. Other provincial offense charges that were laid include drive with headlight coded, entire license plate not plainly visible, windshield obstructed, no mud guards. And I just want to point out those generally refer to charges that relate to modified vehicles. Crimes against persons. This involves threatened or use of violence against a person, may include assaults, sexual assaults, robbery, harassment, and uttering threats. I'm just bringing this to your attention because this is crimes against persons as it relates to Stats Canada, not specifically our crimes against person unit at Barrie Police. We're seeing normal and trending down statistics over the Q1 from 2017 to current. Our 5-year average is 1184, while our current average is 1075. Deputy Johnson and I have had a conversation about this trend. We're monitoring it while the overall trend is down on calls. We will be looking deeper into how high the crime is, so the seriousness of the crimes that fall within that category. Something that we continue to watch. Property crime, we're seeing a very slight increase quarter to quarter, but still on a downward trend overall. The 5-year trend for the first 3 quarters is 2556, and currently we sit at 1874. Although the last quarter appears high, we should be watching this over the longer term, and we want to regression to the mean is a statistical term that talks about how things clear themselves up and return to normal values on a longer term. I don't think I said it as well as you will, but statistically speaking, unless we see this continue, we don't anticipate any issues. Drug offenses. Very slight increase quarter to quarter, but overall it's still stable. We continue to see an increase in methamphetamine. 5-year average for the first 3 quarters is 314, and the current year, quarter 1 to 3 is at 367. So that's trending up, but it's not statistically concerning at this time. We'll continue to monitor this, and please recognize that the majority of these charges are proactive in nature. Criminal traffic violations, there's a slight increase quarter to quarter, but fairly stable looking at it year over year for the past 5. Note that the 5-year average for the first 3 quarters is 454, and our current 3 quarters is at 459. We do see a slight increase, but it is very stable. Of note, in the last quarter, our service did conduct 39 drug recognition evaluations. Other criminal code violations, again, it's a slight increase from quarter to quarter, likely due to the starting of laying of fail to appear charges in our courts. We spoke to that at previous presentations. As already told, during the COVID, most court dates, when someone didn't attend, we just rolled them over, and there were criminal consequences to not showing up to court. This continued for months, and now are returning to a fail to appear criminal charge versus just a bench summons to reorder someone to appear for court. The 5-year average for the first 3 quarters was 1337. So we sit at 1228 in this year, and we're trending low, notwithstanding the elevated stats of 451 for this quarter. Something to watch for the impact in this area is the adult diversion program that we're doing. There are a number of charges that we look to divert if appropriate. That will also, not only will the initial substantive criminal charge not be laid, but then there's not an opportunity to lay a fail to appear charge or any sort of bail violations because they don't actually exist in that circumstance. Miscellaneous section, this is sections that include but are not limited to ambulance, police assist, sudden deaths, landlord-tenant disputes, dangerous conditions, etc., etc. Our 5-year average rests at 49,220. Note that we're trending up at 54,368. This is also captured in each of our 3 quarters this year, so we have already seen an increase in these statistics. Subject to any questions, that's the Q3.
Thank you, and thank you, Deputy. So recognizing that your change in data is more data and better understanding of data has changed some of the numbers, not necessarily a trend in itself. One of the things that you referred to was sort of the COVID effect. And I was curious with regard to traffic. I have heard from a number of associations, for example, snowmobilers associations, motorcycle clubs, associations, as well as the dealers, that the COVID effect has seen a lot more first-time users of different types of vehicles, for example. Therefore, they're seeing more novice, a greater increase in novice operators of whatever the respective vehicle is. Are you seeing traffic patterns that reflect that, maybe less skilled or less observing of traditional, behavior, et cetera, within those groups, for example, on the Marine unit or in just general driving of motorcycles? Are you seeing that in traffic?
No, I don't. That's not been brought to my attention, but that is something worthy of follow-up for sure, Mr. Khan. I did note that our partners to the South Simcoe had reported they're a little bit more rural jurisdiction than us, that they saw increase of events on the trails and the snowmobiling and those types of pathways. But no, we don't. We feel that as we come out of COVID, more people are going to restaurants, shopping, Christmas season here. We're very aware that there are going to be more cars on the road, and we are taking the appropriate actions. But to break it down to that level, I would have to come back.
Well, maybe it's the drug offense slide. You said something that I have not proactive charge. Private or proactive charges, I guess, well, to a reactive charge, I assume is it.
So proactive, Chair, really simply put, that's when we have information or evidence or something to follow up on where we are aware of illicit drug use in our community, trafficking or possession, or it could be a manufacturing, any of those things. So we take steps with our specialists. They will conduct an investigation and put the resources at that. Sometimes that would result in one person, it could be multiple people, it could be criminal organization or many houses across the city, the GTA, or even the province. So that brings in a lot of charges. They often can stem over an extended period of time. So there's a cataloging of charges over a certain time frame. When we talk about reactive, a call from the community said, hey, you know, I found a knapsack and it has, I think, has cocaine in it, or I just was dealing with somebody and this is, you know, what I pulled out of my son's lunch bag at school today. Can you come and deal with that?
For layman, the difference is response to a call service versus call.
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. You nailed it on the head. Proactive is good old fashioned police work. Get out there, find it, and deal with it.
Thank you, Debbie, on your report, for the what time it is, so I'm not well, I appreciate it. All together.
Thank you, it's our pleasure.
In our consent agenda, there are 3 items, staff acknowledgement, public complaints, and financial variance that we want over. Of the reports, members would like poll or questions on that?
Thank you, Eric. And in regards to the financial variance, and I wanted to thank Nancy and her team for putting together some extra information for us. From some questions on that report, I'm not exactly sure what to do with this at this point. I just find the information I'm getting concerning that, you know, we're running a deficit, but we don't really need to fund that entirely. I think that the finance department is doing an excellent job in putting the steps in place, but I guess what I'm looking for maybe is to continue reporting on this, so that we can stay on top of it. And hindsight is 2020, but like now I'm thinking maybe we should ask for money in the budget to the city, because if we're dealing with this deficit and then, you know, we're going to run another deficit, this is not putting our organization in good financial health. And I think as board members, that's part of our duty to ensure that the finances are in order. And like I said, not a reflection of the team. Like, I think that we have very competent people doing the job. But I do think that this item requires more oversight and continued reporting. I think maybe it's the best step at this time, but I'm not entirely comfortable with depleting all of our reserves and then still having a deficit balance. And like I said, I don't exactly know what we can do about it. Like, maybe it's something that we will have to deal with in the 2023 budget and make sure that we're paying more attention to this and highlighting it for our finance partners at the city, because like, it's just not sustainable. If we run into a large investigation in 2022, we fund that. Like, we have to do our police work, and then we will be out of reserve. We're already at a deficit, and then we're just gonna keep digging ourselves a hole. So we've got to keep on top of it.
Very much regards to your inquiries, we have reported it on a monthly basis where we stand, and we did indicate that this was a very unusual year. In 2021, we experienced some cancellations, comments, and we had significant number of will retire. We do not anticipate that we will be affected as we were this year or next year. We're very fortunate. We have recovered funds from the COVID funding from the federal government through the municipality to support us in regards to that. It will be a multi-year that we will be managing the deficit. We maybe have to manage it over a couple of years. The reserves are there for unusual circumstances or a one-time or multiple times over several years. We can do our reserves, so I think that will be a significant number of dollars, so almost not quite $500,000. We'll cover it. We received $500,000 in regards to the COVID numbers, so we're in a position that we have approximately $500,000 over the next couple of years to deficit. I do not anticipate next year that we will have the challenges that we did in 2020. But we will continue to provide a monthly update on where we stand. This month, as you do recall, we did have a significant homicide investigation, so we did see dollars from our overtime funding that was did as a result of it. We did have another retirement that wasn't included in the previous month, but I am happy to say that our projections in regards to revenue, we did see an increase in our revenue from that perspective. It's starting to balance off in some areas.
And I recognize that it's in high and across the province. And I do appreciate the
and we did, as mentioned before, we cut off some of our spending also much earlier in. We're working on multiple strategies to address this deficit.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I mean, obviously, I think that the concern is acknowledged and shared by all, and I as well appreciate Nancy's work and some of the recommendations or examples are some of the programs that were designed and devised with opportunities for existing members to take early leave, et cetera. So that was proactive efforts to assist with the financial position that the service sees itself in. And I expect and anticipate and look forward to more of that type of critical thinking and forward thinking. So I think you have a confidence. So thank you very much.
The only, mine's more, when I look at the deficit that I would describe, I don't like red.
Neither do we.
Have a red pen. But I don't want to oversimplify, but three things significant that we not budget for. This is my term. They're all somewhat COVID related. The comments are down because COVID works on the officers. Obviously, we had outright direct expenses. Then the third thing is the great retirement. We did not budget for several officers, not just officers, members of the service to retire. That's not sustainable. Obviously, that's got to swing around that. I am confident. Questions on any of the consent agenda items? Second, Scott. The other questions? All in favor? Included in our package is a reappointment of Special Constable William Hutchins. Councilor Thompson. Discussion. Favor. included in our package for, I guess, perhaps Deputy Allen. Talk to us about city bylaw, noise bylaw, city of Barrie noise bylaw.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, the service for you, Chair, to address to you, received correspondence from the city of Barrie, specifically Wendy Cook, city clerk, as it relates to a motion made by city council on November 8th. The motion is broken down into two portions. One is that they're asking that the Barrie Police Service Board be requested to review opportunities to enhance the Barrie Police Service response to noise that is disruptive to others, and especially motor vehicle noise, and provide a memorandum back to City Council outlining the results of this review. And the second part of that motion was that the Barrie Police Service be requested to provide information regarding the outcome of the noisy vehicle blitz over the summer and the approach of the Citizens on Patrol program. So, Chair, I can advise you that we are looking at this information. We will report back to the board on Monday as well, and ensure that the correspondence drafted to return to City Council.
Deputy on that.
Through your chair, just one question. In your report on Q3, there was a data, I think, 63 charges in the one day with a race. Do you know if there's anything that was very well received by members of council and the public? Do you know if there's any funding down with that in collaboration with other forces again? For next summer, maybe?
In relation to funding, I'm not aware of any, provincial funding or anything like that would apply to that. There's always initiatives and joint forces participation in some of these events. The race has been going on for many years, and we do throw what we can at different things. Our priority, however, is road safety, as the board recognizes, but we do deal with the continuous complaints, the noisy mufflers and that stuff, that type of thing, as we are able. But as far as funding, all of our funding chief is RIDE. Really, it's directed towards criminal offenses.
Thanks for that. Yeah, it's just, I know with correspondence to go back to council, it all comes from the race program and that they wanted to see more of it and stuff. Response from bylaw was basically they don't have the right to pull over vehicles. So something to work together, but that's
and really quickly, without getting too over the top, the charges under the bylaw versus the charges with the Highway Traffic Act, one is more efficient than the other, and really simply put in layperson's terms is that the Highway Traffic Act provisions that we use at Barrie Police are likely more effective than
That what the city is looking for is noise bylaws specifically related to violations vehicles, or are they saying they want us to now enforce their noise bylaw like in its entirety?
my interpretation. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Chief.
No, go ahead.
Oh, my interpretation is that they want to know what we're doing about the noisy vehicles as it relates to the bylaw enforcement, because that's the title of the thing. So they're not talking about, amending or changing any of the bylaws, but what are we doing? When I interpret it, I'm looking at it from beyond the bylaw and with other legislation that's at our hands to use to tackle the problem as we are able to.
Nice. Thanks, Chair. My only interest, if you will, I appreciate that council receives and the councilors receive frequent complaints about the topic. I trust one of the things that we'll find out, though, is that, allowed to use names, but if you take a Harley under the bridge. It comes stock from the manufacturer as approved as being a loud vehicle. And you take a neon that may not be manufactured, it's not stock as a loud vehicle. So the question is, have we done manipulation or modifications to a vehicle that remains compliant under the Highway Traffic Act or not? I don't know if loud is something that we're going to be able to judge, and that's my question. Is if you take a neon or a Honda and a Harley, if they're both X number of decibels, you can't pick one to fine and not the other unless there's a modification. I have to assume that.
Very subjective, absolutely, Mr. Khan. And the Highway Traffic Act provision is subject to the officer's opinion on whether the noise is excessive and would disrupt the community. The bylaw speaks to a specific decibel, so you have to have a machine that tests it, then you have to calibrate the machine and prove you calibrated it properly, and everything else would be like, doing a breath test investigation, quite honestly. As it relates to modifying, there is provisions in the Highway Traffic Act, and I spoke to some of the charges relayed in my past presentation, where people are removing mufflers or adding things to baffle or make the noises louder. So those things are dealt with. Our team in traffic, they're highly educated in this, and they're highly aware of the products that are out there and what to look for. But that said and done, yeah, it's always subjective on the circumstance.
I wish you good luck, sir.
Thank you.
Question, lots of bylaws that may be passed by municipalities that criminal code of the highway traffic. Is it usurps responsibility?
We have the ability as police officers to enforce the bylaws that the city of our local city of Barrie or any municipality, police services do have the authority to enforce it. But the city of Barrie also have bylaw enforcement officers that can also enforce the bylaws that are.
And
Thank you,
or
Mayor.
Santa made it to the update.
Yes, and it's the holiday season, and last month we didn't have the opportunity to go through our chief's update, and it was posted on our website for members of the community that wished to review it. So we have some general items on the chief's update that we regularly provide. So from a COVID perspective, I'm very happy to report that our directive to our members, we are in 100% compliance to our directive. We still continue to support Central Muskoka District Health Unit on the work of the boosters in food security and the transportation of items to our community. As we have heard through Dr. Gardner and Central Muskoka District Health Unit, that there are an increase in cases within our area, specific to Simcoe, specific to our city, and we do have some of our members that have tested positive for COVID, but it is not related to the workplace, and members of the community were not deemed as close contact with the individuals from our service. We regularly see the calls for service for the month of November, and Deputy Allen has provided a comprehensive review of our stats from the third quarter of this year. This is just a quick snapshot of our calls for service for the Barrie Police Service. So it's just there for your view. Some of the matters that we have been directly involved in is our homicide investigation, where we've had suspects arrested. So before I begin to really briefly speak about it, once again, I offer my condolences to the family and friends of the victim of our homicide that occurred in Barrie on November the 19th. Our service did a comprehensive investigation and still are continuing with that investigation, but we identified 3 males for the incident, and they have been charged with first-degree murder. Another incident of violence and high harm incidences within our community. police officers were involved in 2 calls for service, and we were able to locate 2 9mm handguns, and they've been seized at the beginning of November. So the first event occurred on December the 1st. We responded to a robbery after a victim had her purse stolen. We had members of our uniform patrol, tactical, our canine officers were able to locate both suspects in the investigation, and we arrested 2 suspects for the offense. And during the investigation, we located numerous properties such as discarded items, and we were able to locate drugs and the firearm that I spoke about. And both individuals are facing theft, weapons, and drug charges. The second incident occurred just a few days later on December the 4th. We responded to a disturbance, and upon arrival, police observed an individual with a prohibited weapon. He was arrested, and upon his search, we loaded another loaded 9mm semi-automatic pistol in a pouch around that individual's waist. It's quite interesting to note that during the full investigation after the arrest, we located suspected fentanyl and cocaine, and this now is facing over a dozen criminal charges, and those under the Drug and Substance Act. In regards to our Festive Ride program, we spoke about funding earlier for traffic enforcement. This is one of the campaigns, or one of the areas that we do receive funding at the provincial level. And as the holiday season has begun, it is an important time to remind individuals that consuming alcohol and drugs does create impact to our community when people get behind the wheel of a vehicle. So we are speaking to safety and not driving while impaired. And we started with the launch of the RIDE program on November the 18th, and we have conducted 3 events since that time. And we have, from a statistical perspective, we have conducted 111 roadside alcohol screening devices. We have issued 4 license suspensions during that time. We have had multiple criminal offenses, whether it be drive while over 80, possession of drugs, some charges under the Highway Traffic Act, and under the Cannabis Control Act also. So we just remind people that they make the decision before they get behind the wheel of a car and drive during this time. So we want to ensure that we have our safe roadways and pathways in our city as part of our strategic plan. We have had the opportunity to participate in the community in some great events. So the next few slides are some of the things that we've participated over since we last met in November. I had the opportunity or the honor to join Jason Hallman and his curling coach and drop the puck at the Barrie game to support the Special Olympics, which is one of our organizations that we support. On December the 1st, Deputy Allen and Deputy Johnston joined the Kemptville Rotary Club meeting, where they presented on the Barrie Police Service and ongoing evidence-based initiatives that we're working on. And it was always a pleasure to engage with our community in that way. When you entered for our board meeting today, I hope you had the opportunity to see our mitten tree. This was an initiative that was started many years ago by retired Constable Sheffer, and it is standing in our lobby, and it's quickly filling with mitts and gloves and tubes by very generous people within our community. But the picture you see here today is by one of our Barrie residents, and she dropped off 6 bags. And in those 6 bags there that you see, 327 hats, 7 pairs of mittens, and 31 scarves, all knitted by our great Barrie residents. So if the public is listening, we always encourage people to drop off. Well, we're doing a clothing drive internally too for the Barrie Native Center, and we're doing a food drive also. These are regular things that we do during this time of year. Also, Deputy Johnson and I gladly accepted an invitation to attend the menorah lighting and Hanukkah Fest at the Chabad Jewish Center. It was a cold and blustery evening, but very well attended with people socially distancing. On November the 10th, Staff Sergeant Wynn and members of the Barrie Police Service helped kick off the holiday season by escorting Santa and Mrs. Claus on the Barrie Chamber of Commerce Santa parade, or modified parade, if we should say that. And lastly, many of our members continue to support multiple toy drives. So we supported the CTV Barrie News toy drive along with Rock 95 toy drive. And a big thank you to the community that contributed to these drives as we stopped. Lastly, as the board knows that after a lengthy and thorough budget process, our financial requirement to deliver an effective police services to Barrie was presented and approved by the board yourself, and then we presented it to the City of Barrie Council. It was debated during general committee, and on this Monday, it was approved by council. So we look forward to next year as we work through our budget process to ensure that we deliver an effective services to our community. And this is an opportunity for me to thank members of our service that contributed to the, not just the presentation, but the ongoing work to ensure that we're responsible with our budget practices. And last, this is an unpaid advertisement to encourage people to complete our community safety survey. It is running and online, available to everybody until December 17th. So we continue to see an increase of people participating in the survey, but it's so very important that we hear from our community, engage with the community, to ensure that we're meeting the needs by members of. Thank you very much.
Chief, questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Chief. There's a lot in that presentation, many great things that are in there. Thank you to members of the service, obviously, and the residents, as you mentioned, for all the excellent work we've done in the community. I just wanted to highlight just one special thing, and that is that obviously we're all aware of a few incidents that have happened in the community in the recent past that were quite impactful, emotional, tragic in nature, and certainly you have expressed. And I really wanted to acknowledge you on behalf of the service expressing a very notable level of compassion towards all who've been affected, community at large, but certainly the family members at large. And I just wanted to acknowledge that. So thank you for that. I do believe it makes a huge difference. Seemingly insignificant at times to those who are impacted, but obviously it does make a difference. Question that I do have for you is general one. An incident such as the few that have happened that you highlighted in your presentation over the last month or so, we see initial charges that get laid. Is there an opportunity when appropriate after further investigation, the service can or a prosecutor can recommend additional charges afterwards if it's deemed warranted? Is that correct?
That is correct. But we consult with the Crowns on very serious issues during the investigative process. So we would consult with our Crown attorneys or the homicide investigation. There was constant contact with the Crown attorneys over the 2 days during the investigative process and the apprehension and arrest of the individual. And we still continue to talk with the Crown on this matter. So that's one small example, but it is an example of that ongoing collaboration that is required in investigation.
And the reason for my question is, I think it's understandable in a community that is very proud of peace and safety and having the notoriety, if you will, or the recognition of being a very peaceful and safe community, that when something like this happens, obviously it disturbs people, and some of us as civilians are less patient than others. And I think it's important that the public understands that we also never want to jeopardize the integrity of an investigation by being sort of a knee-jerk reaction or being, less than performing less than our due diligence. So I just wanted to ask that question, that for those who are curious, if there's other things, there was another one in the community that might have been hit by, for example, and those questions have come out, and if it's warranted for investigation, something like that could, not necessarily will, but could, if warranted, be addressed.
You're referring to so from maybe an awareness perspective, that there is legislation in Canada that recognizes hate crime incidents or hate crime and then hate incidents. So hate crime is defined under several sections of the code, and there's two sections, section 318 and 319, that addresses hate propaganda. So those are very specific offenses where they're advocating for genocide, and they are public sentiment of hatred. So those are very, very specific, and those sections need the consent of the federal state. And I would say across our country, there's very few times that threshold is met in regards to the genocide and inciting hatred. So those areas need advocacy, they need inciting, and they need willful promotion in regards to those offenses. If you look at mischief in the criminal code, those are probably the more common hate mischief cases that you hear within the province of Ontario, across the country. But hate incidences may not meet the criminal threshold of meeting the criminal code charges. So there may be an altercation, there may be racial slurs, but that doesn't meet the definition of a hate crime under the criminal code. So we continuously consult with Crowns in regards to, does it meet that threshold? And the instance that occurred here in our city, we were able to arrest the offender rather quickly, and they are going to be held accountable for the incident, but they have not been charged under the criminal code.
I think that's the takeaway as far as public awareness and education is we get a lot of our propaganda news from south of the border, for example, and we draw our own comparisons and conclusions. So for those who are interested, obviously there's some advocacy work for the public to do if they want to speak to their MP or MPP. That's the change that we need to require before the service can. Great, thank you for that education. I appreciate it.
One of those slides, Warren, thank you from the board on the entire, especially that tragic incident that happened. Yeah, John, advice that throughout the service, every level of service. Very tragic. Service for
Will be passed on to our members.
any other community concerns for please?
My concern or feeling concern relates to policing in schools or availability for police to attend schools. I've heard some concerns recently from members of the community around police not being available to address concerns that are occurring in schools. Particularly, parents from St. Mike's School contacted police and the principal contacted police to try to address an incident that was taking place with, not in the school, it's outside the school, but it's just a number of students in the same school that are committing this, I don't know, I guess it is technically crime, but it's young people. And the goal from the administration at the school and the parents was to have police come in and talk to the class, like generally about things. And I heard the response that they got is that we don't have officers on attend. And so I think on those situations, from my perspective, remember that's disheartening because I think at times when, if you can be preventative, which I think we tried to do, then we can address these types of situations potentially in the school with a large group of students, let them know, hey, don't do this. These are the things that could happen. This is the impact you're having on the community. And maybe that can just help prevent future crimes from occurring. When he gets a reality check in their grade 7 or 8, might help them not to do things when they're in grade 11 or 12. That could be. And then on that same vein is in regards to our secondary schools. And I know there's challenges obviously also with COVID and only essential people being in schools, but as a board member, I'd like maybe a future report or some sort of information on how we can positively interact in the schools, and even thinking of some of the incidents that have occurred in our community recently, young offenders being charged. One assumes that those people are in high school or were in high school, and are there opportunities again for prevention measures that can help to mitigate future crimes from happening, future impact are. So that's my community concern right now. It's, in a nutshell, working with schools and prevention, using evidence-based policing, and working with children.
Thank you very much for your comments. I'll follow up with the specific incident through Deputy Allen in isolated incidents that you're speaking to in regards to St. Mike's. From an overall perspective, we will provide what we are doing within our community. We have spoken to the board in regards to the Speak Out program, which was an evidence-based program that is being delivered in conjunction with other organizations in our community. We do face some challenges within the school board because there is a shift in regards to need for policing in the schools. So we will provide you with what we are doing in the schools, and there is always, police will always react to an event occurring in schools. Our community safety and well-being unit is responsible, part of their responsibilities are working within their areas of responsibility. So we'll provide something next year and the beginning of the year in regards to schools and offenses on or in relation to.
Fantastic. And as you were saying, like, maybe it's not always a police officer, but we have a number of partnerships with other organizations. So what can we do to work with our partners to have the appropriate person in the schools just working with the right way?
Through to the deputy real quick, just something that Ms. Strawn mentioned, there was that request from council that included 2 items, and I sort of heard them come together. And one was around the question of the use of the Citizens on Patrol program. And I was just curious of are they active redeployed at this point? And
In November, the Citizens on Patrol program, we did a speed watch program, so high visibility out there. This was not an enforcement initiative. It was just seen, we saw and heard signboards and radar, things like that. So really a public awareness campaign showing different areas within our community that were pre-identified for them to attend, and just let the safe drivers or the person speeding know that we're out there. And they work with our
We did on our team, so they were sworn in. Week.
Chief, our next board meeting is November 20th next year. And for the fall. I say November.
I was gonna say, we're not federal members of parliament or anything.
January 20th, and for the coast, maybe watching, that will be 4:30. Morning meeting. 20th of January. Motion.
Thank you.